the title of this particular roundtable is Revelations and Resilience. And in part, we talked about it and wanted to talk about it in that sense because most of the time when we hear about issues of being Hapa, it's always the tragic mulatto story, the mixed up, the betwixt and between, somehow confused, not knowing where you are. And we looked at each other and said, we know who we are. Usually it's someone else who doesn't. And so we thought that what we wanted to do is talk about not so much from the standpoint of, again, sort of if you go to theater and you go to a theater production about multiraciality, it's usually about angst, right? Because in theater, right, angst sells. If you watch it on TV, it provides the drama, angst sells. And the discourse or the sort of public conversation about multiracialness has always been about angst. And more recently, it's been about hybrid vigor. We're going to save the world. Most of us have a hard enough time just finding the bathroom. So in other words, it's a one-dimensional notion of who we are. We're either tragic or we're super. We're the Matrix, right? And they found a Hapa to play him. So in that sense, we said we wanted to be the real, right? As Maxine Hahn, what's the movies and what's the real? And sort of share with you some of the real. Not that there aren't struggles, not that there aren't things that overcome, but to talk about sort of the issues of revelations and resilience and hear your stories of that as well.
Rika was saying that, our kids are living in a totally different time. So what we went through or what our experiences are probably not going to apply to this generation. And one of the things is that there is a legitimate, viable presidential candidate who is out and open about his international, multi-ethnic background. And so, when you opened with that, I was like, wow, there is this mirror of ourselves. Not only is he biracial, but he grew up born and raised in Hawaii and Indonesia, and more and more with the expatriate communities and international communities, we're seeing more and more multiracial, multi-ethnic people.
My husband is a Chinese American, and so my kids are very international. And the things that, I always say that I'm so exhausted by March because we have, in our family, we celebrate American Thanksgiving and American Christmas. We have Japanese Oshogatsu, and then we have Chinese New Year. So by the time March comes around, I'm like ready to collapse. And just watching how they experience these events and the influence of the extended family is so hilarious sometimes, and you wonder, well, God, are they going to be like, what will this mean to them as an adult? And also when they get married, when they have their own children, how will they manifest this in their own lives? And I know it will be different from what I did, and you talk about intention, and intention. I had the greatest intentions, or I always like to say that I was a really great parent until I became one. But in theory, you have this intention, and you do try to be consistent and convey these messages, but you never know how it's going to evolve in their personalities and in their own lives.
I think one of the things that was instrumental for me in growing up was being around, or particularly when we went back to Japan, and in this case it was Okinawa, and there were lots of other Hapa families around us, and there were some folks from Japan, Hawaii, some Japanese Americans from Hawaii, and I was in junior high, and we were talking, and sort of it was the late 60s, and so the issues of race, the issues of identity were constant. It was what everyone talked about. It was the Vietnam War. Most of our fathers were going to Vietnam. What did that mean for those of us with African-American fathers, the discussions that were going on about that, and those sorts of issues. But one of the nice things about being there, though, was that you didn't look necessarily different. And it was at that time for me as an adolescent, I spoke enough Japanese to be able to negotiate and navigate off base. I spoke English, so on base was fine. And one of my friends from Hawaii says, "Hey, you're Hapa Afro," and gave me a name. And so having that name was really important. And you know, when you're 12, having that name, so if someone says, "What are you?" you can go, "I'm Hapa Afro." And if you don't like it, tough, right? But to sort of to allow you to know yourself.